I had the humbling opportunity to speak with Lisette. And Lisette, I met maybe 10, 15 years ago at this point. Um, she is doing amazing work. Met her through a show called Crime Stoppers, where she was helping law enforcement solve unsolved homicides. That kind of evolutionized into missing people. And she's always been an amazing liaison to cops and to first responders. She's a great buffer between the cops, victims' families of crimes, and the media. And she has this huge admiration for cops, and it definitely shows. And just her line of work in general, she's has a huge heart, and she's always willing to help cops out and um, help victims of crimes out, and actually find or help find individuals that committed these crimes to bring them to justice. But a little different podcast, but I loved it. She still has a lot of connections. She's probably seen a lot more um, violence than a lot of cops. She always puts herself in those situations just to try to be the voice of reason, and be that comforting person in a trying time. But I enjoyed the podcast. You guys let me know what you think.
So you got to ask yourself, why do you want to do this? What keeps you motivated to stay proactive and get bad guys off the street?
The facts is a big cannon against a little tiny gun of opinions, because we've all heard people give us their opinions.
Let's talk about how easy it is to get narcotics in this country.
Once they're in this country, anywhere within 2 days, the drugs will be in our cities.
Because we know knowledge is power.
Well, today I'm Beyond the Barrel. I'm lucky enough to have Lisette. I know Lucette through, I guess, law enforcement, but it's more of a crime prevention or like cold case files. I think that's where I originally started to find out who you were. You were doing a lot of cold case stuff.
Yes.
So it's a little different than most podcasts that we have. We usually have first responders on, but I think they kind of fall into that same realm. Let's talk about what you're doing now, and then we'll go back a little bit. But what are you up to now?
Okay. Well, currently, of course, still working with law enforcement on unsolved homicide cases, missing persons, violent crimes. So my proper title, I guess, is a crisis responder, also crisis publicist, because I have created relationships with the media, thanks to the TV show, which really jump-started my career, which was Case File Chicago. We can talk more about that later on. But really, my role right now is, again, to continue to assist law enforcement if they need anything additional, such as working with the families, because we know, Kenny, all too well that, sometimes families feel like, oh, the police aren't doing enough. I haven't heard from my detective. That's when detectives can say, hey, Lisa, we need you to work with the family, be the buffer, let them know we are working, keep them, tuned in. At the same time, explaining to families what the process is, because not every family is going to want to accept that there's no new tips coming in, and police, just because police are quiet doesn't mean they're not working on the case. So that's really my role, is to make sure I step in and be a buffer or a liaison, if you will.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, like if you're a victim of a crime or anything, like, and you're dealing with homicides or missing people, in that world, that's the most important thing that's probably ever happened in their life. When it comes to law enforcement, that might not be the only homicide or missing person case that they're working. So, it just gets kind of overwhelmed. And I understand as being a family member or the victim's family or whatever it may be, like how, I guess, detached it can feel. But, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think detectives are doing it intentionally. It's just they get so much things going on that they forget to just kind of give updates. I don't think it's intentional by any means whatsoever.
No, and you know what? You hit it. And that's the thing. And that's, again, part of my role is to explain to families, absolutely not. Your case has not been forgotten. It's not sitting in a box on a shelf in the storage room somewhere. Other things are popping up. Unfortunately, we do have a shortage of law enforcement right now. Budgets are really tight. We don't have the manpower that we used to, so everybody's being stretched really thin. And sometimes our detectives are taking on more roles than one. Example, you're a detective, you might not be just a homicide detective. You may be working violent crimes, missing persons, theft, robbery. You might be working all kinds of crimes. And so it's not that you're forgotten. It's just that things also on the other end are piling up.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go back to where were you born and raised?
I was born in Hobart, raised in Hobart, and so lived there all my life. After high school, I went to Miami and lived for 7 years, and then came back, and then just kind of doing some entrepreneurship stuff. Those that know me know I like to work rogue. I'm not really good underneath, a boss. I kind of like to do my own thing. And so fast forward, we ended up starting a radio show because we kept hearing like, we need to reach the bilingual market. We need to do this. So I was like, oh, cha-ching, there's money, So we started a bilingual radio show, and that kind of led into doing newspaper stuff. So I went to go work for the Times newspaper in the newsroom side. So I picked up a lot of media stuff. Now, okay, let me backtrack. So my law enforcement background starts, I want to say back in 2005, 2004, where I was working closely with one of the sheriffs at the Lake County Sheriff's Department. And so I wanted to, try my luck, with the police department. What happened is I found out, trying to do some testing and stuff, that I have an autoimmune disease, and it was going to not be helpful for me to do some of the things necessary, physically, to do police work. So I stayed with it. It was actually Sheriff Roy Dominguez who allowed me to just come in and learn and still do things. And so I picked up pieces on that. And then fast forward to 2011, where I was headhunted by a man in Cleveland, not on a bad note, headhunted. I know this is a crime show. So let me verify. Okay, so I was sought out to start a show in Chicago called Crime Stoppers Case Files, which again worked with law enforcement. It was very pro-police, so I had to make sure that he made sure, the producer Sean Reck made sure whoever's going to run this show has to be pro-police. Okay, and so thankfully I fit that category, and I already had contacts with some of the police departments. So we started the show in Chicago, which was very, very difficult. In fact, although it was named Chicago, Hobart Police Department was one of the first departments. It was Hobart, East Chicago, and Gary that really gave me my jump start. So those departments always close to my heart. And so that's where we started doing some of the cases first before moving on to Chicago PD. And then, of course, some of the other areas.
Did you have any passion growing up for law enforcement or anyone in the family? Or like, where does this come from? Or is it just as you've, I guess, navigated your life and finding a fondness for it?
Okay, funny you asked that. I'm going to tell you because I don't tell this story a lot. Nobody really asks either. When I lived in Miami, there was an incident where I was coming off. I lived downtown, so I was coming off. There's a metro rail, it runs through the city. So I was coming off. I was getting off of work. I was walking to my apartment, and it's a little bit of a walk, not far. And I was jumped by like 5 people, and it was like, they just did enough to probably traumatize me and take my purse and my work bag, and then they left. So I got to my apartment, and the security officer at the front's like, well, we got to call police. And so we did. I waited forever. I'm not going to lie. In hindsight, it's like downtown Miami, they're busy with bigger crimes. I shouldn't say that, but this is a law enforcement show, right? So bigger crimes than just somebody purse snatching. And so finally the copper got there, and he's like, if you saw the people, would you recognize them? And I go, yeah. Now, here's the thing, Kenny. So my apartment, think about like Detroit, where they've got, 8 miles. So some of it is really nice and some of it's, ghetto. So I was on the brink, my side was still kind of nice. It wasn't like fancy, but it was still nice. And so once you crossed over, you started hitting like the projects in Section 8 and some of those lower income areas. So the officer said, there was two per car. And the one guy said, officer said, will you recognize them? And I said, yeah, I will. So I jumped in the back of the squad and we went driving. And I'll never forget, people were throwing things at the squad, and it was, just terrible how they hated the police. So then a call comes over the radio. I didn't know what any of it meant. I just heard something come over and it sounded serious. And the cop driving goes, "We're going to take a break from that. We're going to take you for a ride real quick." And I'm like, all right, we go to the station. What are we doing? You find something out. So we drive and we pull up and there's this huge chaotic scene. So the officer, and I'm just like looking around, like, what are we doing? I'm in the backseat of the squad car. And the copper says, "We got a guy with a gun situation. He's trying to shoot at the people in the house." And I'm like, what? He goes, "If you hear shots, just lay down."
Jesus.
Lay down. Dude, it was so, you talking about like old school policing. This was it. He was like, "Just lay down." And I was like, dude, no, because I want to see what happens. And that ignited my, I was so intrigued by that. I think that ignited the flame, like, wait a minute, let me see what happens. I was more nosy and curious than I was like afraid. And so that's where I got my feel for it.
That's awesome. So it was Crime Stoppers originally that you started doing?
Right. So it started as Crime Stoppers. It started as Crime Stoppers because the original cases came from the organization Crime Stoppers. So there was already a show in Miami, LA, and Cleveland. The next big market would have been Chicago. So going forward, the Crime Stoppers isn't that big here in this area yet. Northwest Indiana, Chicago. It's there, but it's not like huge. We're like, it's on the side of cop cars, call for tips, Crime Stoppers. So we had a hard time getting cases and working hand in hand with them. So I was like, I can get my own cases. And so that's what we ended up doing is I was getting cases from the detectives. They were like, you know what, that's cool. I have this case from 1992 that I've always been wanting to solve. So we'd bring, the detectives on. They would give the facts of the show. I wouldn't do none of that. And that's how I earned my credibility, is because I wasn't just going to be on there making stuff up or, flashing it, making it bigger than what it seemed. I wasn't going to sensationalize anything. Okay, especially if it wasn't true. And so they would do the facts of the case, and then I would bring the families on to do their plea or, just a plea for justice, and just let people know what it's been like without that family member. And then we do a reenactment. And so we started, getting cases, and all of a sudden now all the departments are like, and then I finally worked my way into Chicago PD, thanks to then Superintendent Judy Weiss, who, got me in. And so that was like 6 superintendents ago. But, they allowed me into that PD. Now, here's the interesting thing. Chicago PD doesn't allow news cameras like with their department. They've done missing persons, but they're very, very picky on homicide cases. And so we were able to work around that once they saw how we worked the show, that it wasn't me, it was detectives saying only what they wanted to say. Sometimes we run into, I always call them like vigilante, crime chasers, where they want to add in their pieces or assume what they want to assume. So we were letting the police departments do that. And so they felt very comfortable. And then here comes the FBI following, Homeland Security, ATF. So now I'm able to work with all of them, and they all have this trust factor with me. And I appreciate that.
What was the first case that you worked with them?
With Chicago PD?
No, with Crime Stoppers.
Oh my goodness. So I know we did one in East Chicago, and it was one of our first ones. And actually, why do you ask these questions? You've got this mind of pulling out all these crazy things. So this is actually kind of funny looking back. So we did a case, it was a murder case in East Chicago. And we ended up, so we were kind of wild. Like, we just went rogue. We're like, let's do the reenactment in front of their house, the guy's house. Okay, because they were on, public housing, and we were on the sidewalk. Well, I was new at this. And so I was like, go up to the door. The guy was found dead on his door, and, you're supposed to stay away from certain property lines, And so me not knowing better, I was like, go lay on the doorstep. I don't know if anybody's home. If they come out, we'll just be like, whatever. Well, the camera crews are all out there. And then we have East Chicago was out there doing security for us. And so we get a call from the mayor's office. And he's like, I need to know who was out there filming, because the mother said that her son was really scared by people running around because we had our guns that were like props, and if somebody was laying down and they thought they were dead and it scared her son. And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, ugh. I'm like, well, who, we didn't know that. Well, so I relayed the message to Detective Fife. I'll never forget, from East Chicago. And Detective Fife says, Lisa, her son is 23 years old and the suspect. We're cool. Just leave it. So,
Wow. So
yeah, and that case ended up getting solved. Yeah, that
did
case
he
ended up
end up
getting
getting
solved.
charged? The guy that was
Yes,
afraid?
yes,
Oh, wow. That's
yeah.
crazy.
So the mom called complaining on us. Yes, I crossed the line looking back. I didn't know any better, but hey, case closed.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Just to, I mean,
Yeah.
to think about like if he's a suspect of the crime and he's watching it be reenacted.
Oh, I know. And what's crazy is, people, when we would do the reenactments, we try to make them as real as possible, and I can't tell you how many times, there was a time we were in Cicero doing a recreation of a Chicago case, because we wouldn't film in Chicago because the gangbangers were like, you ain't doing that here. Okay.
Mhm.
And we get it. There's a respect thing. Kenny, you know how this
Yeah.
works. And so we were doing the reenactment in Cicero, and we were on somebody's lawn. The guy, we had, the actors, one was chasing another through the lawn because that's how it went. A lady drove her car onto the neighbor's grass and tried to hit the actor because she thought he was a real suspect. And she was like, not in my neighborhood, and she's snapping off, and we're like, oh, lady, we're sorry. This is, a reenactment. So we had to explain.
Wow.
So.
That's awesome. What was the what I'm just curious, what was the Hobart case that you guys worked on?
Okay, so there was one belonged to Gonzalez, Officer Gonzalez, who is now Captain Gonzalez. Am I right? Jimmy Gonzalez. So he had a case in Hobart, and my gosh, I can't think of the name of it. But anyways, it was, I can't think of the name offhand. But happened where the mother was coming into the garage. She gets killed going into the house.
Still a
Okay.
cold case. I know what I'm
It's
talking about.
still a cold case. It absolutely is. And
Son
I'm
was home and
sorry.
heard it. The son was home, heard a shot or something like that.
Mhm. Yes, yeah. And so that was our case with Hobart. And I'll tell you this. I threw an idea out to the producer. The producer, or I'm sorry, the creator of the show. He came out to Chicago, and I told him, we had a meeting in our office in Chicago, and I'm like, I have an idea. I want to do a canine show. And he's like, absolutely not. We're not doing this. Is not about canines. I'm like, please, let me just try it. So he's like, no. So I'm like, okay. So I knew it was coming to Chicago. So I got a bunch of officers. In fact, Simon Gresser and some of the old school, canine officers, they came to Chicago with me for that meeting. And we were able to convince him to do a
That's
canine
awesome.
show. And do you know that show was our highest rated ever? In fact, it was so high that he ended up using it to promote doing a show across the world. So it was shown in like Australia and Germany and all these other countries.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
What was the canine show about?
How they work with law enforcement, what their role is, what their purpose is. So it's more of an informational piece, not a crime per se. But I wanted, my love for canines goes pretty far and is pretty deep. And so I was like, we need to show what these guys do. Forget the two-legged ones. Let's pull out the real heroes, right?
Yeah.
So we ended up doing that, and it was an awesome show.
I think it's pretty evident that I'll probably be speaking at the Justice X conference, but I wanted to give my little instructor spiel like everyone else is. And the main reason is because I wanted to come in here and thank all these amazing instructors that are willing to donate their time away from their family, their profession, and their friends to come and make the profession better. I don't know how I became so lucky with the ability to surround myself with amazing people in this profession. I have some of the most amazing friends in this profession. They're the most selfless individuals willing to go out on a whim, put a conference together with me, and just to try to make the profession a little bit better. And I don't know how I pulled this off. I don't know what it is, but I'm beyond grateful for them. That being said, when I speak at the conference, communication is the biggest thing to me. I think that communication is the most important tool that we have as cops, and that's not verbal communication. That could be nonverbal communication. I'm going to focus a lot of my instruction on that aspect, where communication is universal. It doesn't have to just pertain to interdiction. It's all of law enforcement. If you have the ability to communicate with someone that is a multimillionaire and a guy that's homeless living on the street, your career is going to be a lot more fruitful. And you have this ability to have a lot more empathy when you're communicating and understanding and actively listening. Someone else came up with this. I love it. So I'm going to throw it out there. As cops, we are often waiting to respond and we're not actively listening, but you can't do them both. So I think as cops, you ask a question, engage, and actively watch what their response is. It doesn't have to be this such a strict format of what you're asking, chronological order or anything like that. Let a conversation flow like you're talking to one of your friends. Don't just be so rigid. And that's where I think a lot of us fail. And it's not our fault. Until you know that you're doing it wrong, you'll never know. Like I was very robotic as a cop and I couldn't communicate with people. I know that for a fact. I'm introverted and I go to the police academy and all this other stuff. But anyways, I can't wait to see you in South Carolina in April of 2026 with all these amazing instructors.
Do you still work with them or?
Hobart Canines?
No, the Crime Stoppers.
Okay, so Crime Stoppers itself, this organization does, yeah, they do their own thing. So when COVID came, we lost our funding for the show, okay, because we were funded. And I was like, oh gosh, I got all these relationships. I got all these families. People still need me to do what we've been doing all this time. So we started doing more social media stuff. And then I ended up creating relationships with all the media. So in that sense, I'm able to now, which we love the show and it worked beautifully, but now we have bigger market because we have all these television stations with us now. So I can call and be like, hey, I got this case. We want to get it on. I'll get a statement from the police department. If they can't join me, then they'll give me what I can say and not say, and I'll get their blessings before I do it every single time. And then we do it that way. And so that's how I work. That's where the publicist piece comes in now, because I'm now working more with the news stations.
I was gonna say it's it's similar, whatever you're doing, but besides like, I guess the reenactments, but it's still like the same type of thing. I just wasn't sure if it was under that umbrella or if it was under something else.
Oh, yes, and you're right. It's not. It is now. Now I still kept the case file Chicago because that's my identity. So we still have that as our umbrella, but I do it on a different level now. I was just fortunate enough that we still kept that entity going, case file Chicago. So we do a lot of outreach stuff and partnership stuff, and recently I think we started maybe 2 years ago now, where I got a phone call from the creator of, the show Case Files. He's gone and done beautiful documentaries, crime stuff, all kinds of great crime stuff. And I got a call and he's like, hey, I need you to work with a friend of mine. And he's like, he's trying to get into Chicago. Chicago, Kenny, this, is a very difficult market. Like if you don't know, they're like, we don't know you. And you know that,
It's almost like a trust factor. I feel like
bingo.
When it comes to
That's
the
it.
department and everything, it's just it's like if you're not being vouched for, you're probably not getting in.
You know what? That's the perfect way to say it. If you're not vouched for, I think that's, and I'm going to start using that. If you're not vouched for, yeah. So he says he's trying to get into some stuff in Chicago. Chicago PD is not letting him in. What do you have similar that he can do some filming? And I was like, well, what does he want to do? And he's like, well, he's this guy and he films crimes and like all over the world. And I'm like, okay, crimes? What kind of crimes? We're talking about what are we talking about? He goes, well, you can look him up. His name's Tommy. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right, whatever. He goes, he's known, everybody knows him. You don't know him? And I'm like, never heard of him. Well, then he says, I said, okay, go ahead and pass him my number. Let me see what he wants. Because if it's not pro-police and it's criminal stuff, or if he's going to put the police in a bad light, I'm not doing it. I'm not risking my relationships for you to get whatever you're going to get. So it ended up being Tommy G, who some of your viewers probably know, or listeners know, your audience. And now keep in mind, Kenny, I still didn't know him. And he's like, hey, Lisette, I heard, you can help me get in. I'm like, well, hold up, because Chicago PD is not going to let you in. I'm going to stop you right there. I'm like, I've got a couple other departments that I could talk to. And he's like, okay. And I go, what are you looking to do first? And he's like, okay, I want to do what it's like, what a police department, what it looks day to day with a police officer. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, but you work criminal stuff. I'm like, this is what I need from you. I will connect you, but it has to be pro police. Don't you dare make my guys look bad. And I have to have some creative in it. Like, I need to be on that ride along because of something, you know what I mean? So I'm like, I need some of that creative control. And he was like, cool, okay, no problem. And I was like, all right. So we set it up, and we ended up, we called Gary. Gary didn't want any part of it. And then East Chicago PD was like, heck yeah, what do you want to do? And I was like, really? And so we ended up rolling with EC, and, and we're going to start our third one pretty soon. I'm not sure. I think when it warms up a little, we'll start our third episode. The first episode, Kenny, racked over 4 million views.
I think even the second one's probably, I've watched them too. So the second one's probably pretty close to that too.
Pretty close? Okay,
yeah,
good.
it's gotta be. Like, I can't remember what it was, but yeah. And it is interesting because Tommy does do a bunch of criminals, but he's very impartial. Like, so I was kind of afraid that he was going to lose the clout of credibility in the underworld, kind of, if that makes sense. Because now he's riding with cops, and they're like, oh, you're going to be a snitch or whatever, maybe.
Yes.
But he's just very impartial, and he just reports the facts on both sides of it. So
exactly.
There's like if you're doing it that way, I don't know how you could have animosity or hate for a guy that's just, this is how it is. This is what it is. He's not putting his bias on it at all.
Right. In fact, when we were filming, especially the second time around, because I think we caught a lot more heat the second time we were filming with some of the, the bad guys out there. One of them was like, dude, man, I follow you. I thought you were cool, man. This ain't cool. And Tommy's like, well, it ain't cool. You're out here doing what you're doing. And so he knows how to shut him down, but in a way that still holds his credibility. He talked to him in their language, and it's like cat and mouse game. The rules. It's like cops and robbers. You know the rules when you're playing the game. And so interesting thing is that Chief Jose Rivera, East Chicago Police Chief, he's like, Lisette, do you believe that my applications for being a police officer in East Chicago has risen because of that Tommy episode? 100%. And I was like, really? So it's really cool. So, so we're continuing to work together. There's been some other offers, international stuff that come in that I guess follow Tommy, and they want to do the same stuff. And yeah.
That's awesome. My buddy, Tom Rizzo, is on Patrol Live. I don't know if you follow this, but anyways, but he said that every department that is on Patrol Live, their application pool like doubles, triples, goes to the roof, even if they're, so like, I don't know. I think that when individuals want to be the police and they see that they're allowed to be the police, like EC, you're allowed to be the police, and you're a lot of cops that sign up, that's what they want to get into, like gangs, drugs, like finding them, deterring gangs, like all of that stuff, not like get into gangs and drugs, but that was bad terminology, but yeah, so now they see it, I'm like, okay, cool, this department is encouraging and allowing their cops to do this. I think that attracts the right cops to that area, and it doesn't matter about at that point pay or anything like that. It just matters that they're allowed to go out there and be the police.
Excellent point, because you are so spot on, because Chief Rivera said almost verbatim what you just said, is that I need people to see that I support my police officers enough to let them be the police, and that there's transparency. And if you're on TV or you're on the show and what you're doing is the right thing, I don't have a problem. And so what you're saying is exactly right. You've got to let the police be the police, and so that is one of the big things that Chief Rivera said, is like, let them do their job. I'm here to support them, but let them do their job.
Why do you think he was willing to take that chance? Do you have a relationship with him, or is that something that he's just more of on the forefront of, like, proactively thinking, like, how can I showcase my agency and my guys?
Both. When we started the TV show, Chicago was always like a second home to us because they allowed us to film in their building. So we would film a lot of family cases there in there, and we would do a lot of reenactments there. So from the very beginning, Chicago was very supportive of what me and my team were doing. And so since then, and because, Chief Rivera came up from the ranks, he saw us be there, since 2012. So he already knew what we were about. So he felt safe in that sense. So going to the second part of what you said, yeah, the transparency, because again, he wants people to see this is what it's like to be a cop. Me as police chief, I want people to see what my cops go through. I also want my cops to know that I have their back, and I want them to still do their job despite the camera being on them. Do it how you know how to do it. And that's exactly what they did. It was very laid back. If you listen to the podcast, or I'm sorry, you watch the videos, they talked the way they talk normally. They acted like they did normally. Nothing changed and nobody stopped them. In fact, Kenny, what we did is before, and this is my other rule, before you release anything, I need that chief or that detective to see that raw footage of what you're going to, or what the footage is, not the raw footage. I don't need to show that. The footage of what you're going to put out before, because you know very well, just like I do, sometimes things slip, and you say stuff just because you're talking out loud. And so it's very important for me to, not that we're trying to hide anything, but we still want to protect the integrity of certain things. And it was important to me that it was protected, and I do, I'm not going to lie. And everybody knows I'm very protective of the officers I work with.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it takes a big person like Tommy to be willing to do that because he's got a million, 2 million, 5 million followers, whatever he has, a million, so many. So, I mean,
Right.
that's cool that he's willing to agree to these terms. But I mean, why do
Kenny,
you
he
think
came. He came to my neighborhood. He didn't have a choice.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Why do you think Gary said no?
They actually told me why, and they said that Tommy had come maybe a couple years prior to this and had did a episode on. I'm not sure of what
I know which one it was.
what it was. You do know? Okay.
Yeah, there was
So
like he went out and spoke to some like gang members or something along in the city. So maybe the conflict of interest there, is that what they were looking at?
no, I think it was more like what you said. Like they spoke to gangbangers and they thought that it would still go that direction and it would make the city look bad in a sense. Well, why are you showcasing our gangs? And so I don't think I really got a chance to explain fully. I think I got stopped at the door without, and
Just
I
by
have a
saying
great
his name.
relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but when it came to that, they were like, "No, we
They
can't."
probably have a bad taste, and I don't know. I don't remember exactly if they said anything derogatory about law enforcement or the community or
Yeah,
whatever. But
yeah,
maybe that's what it was, and yeah, you just say his name, and they're like, nope, not happening. If
yeah.
it was someone else, maybe it was, yeah,
Pretty
maybe.
much. Yeah. It's exactly right. So yeah, so that's that. And I respect Tommy tremendously. And, of course he's, and that opened up doors. And what he told me was I need to get into one department to show them that I do love and appreciate the police. Just because this is my bread and butter over here doesn't mean I don't have that, appreciation for law enforcement. So he was able to film with a few other law enforcement agencies across the country because the door was open here. They saw what was done, and he was able to do it elsewhere.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. I guess I haven't.
Mhm.
I don't know if those have been released or not, but I definitely haven't seen those. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
What are you doing now? Like, what is where do you see the direction of your work? Where do you see it going? What is your entrepreneur spirit want to do?
I like this, but I think I'm when you deal, I'm preaching to the choir here. Your audience knows this all too well. You get tired of hearing the screams, the cries, you get tired of seeing the blood, the gore. People don't appreciate what you do. You're always going to be the bad guy no matter how much you try. And I'm not saying everybody's like that, but those are the ones that kind of stand out to me because I'm like, why am I doing this? Who's appreciating this? So I don't I love what I do, but I also at the same time I'm getting tired. I'm getting a little tired. I see my future role. I've started dabbling in. Past couple years, I put together some classes with the Northern Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, which I loved. I'm so thankful that the executive director, Jim Markle, gave me the opportunity to put classes in there. And so I want to continue doing some of that and maybe slow down on some of this end. But one of the other things I really started getting an interest in, and it started, years ago, I think when I started my show, and one of the big things I'll never forget is I was interviewing a Chicago detective. And we were talking about one of his cases. And I noticed he was fidgeting a lot. And, I'm like, because you got mic on you and, we don't want you to really fidget. And so he was fidgeting. I'm like, wait, something's wrong. And he started crying. He lost it. And I remember him standing up and he's like, I can't do this. His case file fell to the floor. And we're like, okay, something's wrong, and he said, I'm doing one case here with you guys, but you guys, I just got 30 more over the weekend, and that's not on top of the other cases that are piled. And, that opened my eyes because I'm like, these guys are overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And, I put that in the back of my mind because at that time, I had a mission to get stories out, but that stayed with me. And then another time, we were interviewing another Chicago detective. The case was the little girl's head was cut off. And another big case happened at the same time, and it happened in the same unit as this detectives, and he had both cases. And he came in, he kept calling me, he said, I'm gonna be late. But I'm working these cases. And I'm like, no, if you got that, we can reschedule. But he didn't want to. He goes, no, because all my cases need as much as I can give. And if this show can go on air to help me solve that case, then I can carry on with these others. And I'll never forget, he came and sat down in our sitting area. And I looked at him and he had his sunglasses on, his eyes were closed and tears were running down. And I was like, these guys, like, who's their hero? Who's helping the heroes? And that stayed with me, Kenny, for a long time. And so for the past couple of years, I've been getting more involved with officer wellness and mental health because I think that's a whole nother topic for your show. But it's become very important to me. The past several years, we've done suicide awareness walks at Chicago PD. So we've been every September nonstop for 48 hours. We'll go from each district and stop and talk to all the whatever officers are on duty right then. We stop and talk to them and just how important they are to be there. Chicago PD has one of the highest, if not the highest suicide. In fact, I think it is, right? The highest suicide rate.
Probably the number of officers. I mean, I don't know, like if you start how big their department is, but yeah, it's got to be pretty high.
It's so bad. And you know what, Kenny? Those are the only ones they mention. You know how many times I've gotten calls, hey, so-and-so in district, whatever. I'm like, dang, that just don't get out. And so we would go to each district and just tell them, you guys matter, even if we sound redundant or people are like, this is stupid. What am I listening to this for again? Again, you just don't know. And so we've been doing that.
You don't have to answer this question, but personal opinion, do you think that has a lot to, do you think the support from the administration has anything to do with that outcome of suicide?
Oh, 100. Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, so now Superintendent Larry Snelling that we have now is a godsend. He is a cop's cop. He's been through the ranks. He knows what everybody's going through. So let's put him in a different category because I'm going to talk to the previous administration. That's where we had problems. Somebody coming from Dallas to come talk to Chicago about, maybe the crime technically, but it's a whole different dynamic. Kenny, you know this. I feel
It's
like,
totally different.
yeah, like, Northwest Indiana, Chicago, same garbage, same trash, and it's a different dynamic of how they act in Dallas, and so that, along with an city administration, who openly says, oh, we're going to cut the budget. We don't need so many cops, take away this and this and this from them, then yeah, morale's going to start hurting, so I do blame that a lot on the support, on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is just me from being inside, and I don't know. I can't talk about the ones that have committed suicide, but I feel like we as cops kind of mentally prepare to see a lot of the stuff that we're going to see. Like, sure, like you, as long as you're like and anticipating or expecting to see dead bodies and these types of things, like, sure, like seeing a dead kid is going to affect everyone. Yeah, but like if you're mentally prepared, I think that you can go a long way where you like, all right, I'm mentally prepared. I'm going to see this stuff, and you can cope with it. But if you have to deal with that on the street, and then you have a poor administration that doesn't support you, so now you're like, all right, not only am I dealing with this stress, I'm dealing with this stress that's coming, and you just have like no escape. You're just getting squeezed at both ends. I feel like that's a lot of times where people make those, I don't know, irrational decisions, and because they don't feel like they can go up and say, hey, I'm having problems with this because of this. And if I can't leave this because then I leave the guys and girls that I work with shorthanded. So now it's just like pressure. And it's like, I don't have any other options. And they have many other options, but in their mind, that's what they're thinking. I don't have any other options. And I can't go and ask for help because they don't support.
Okay, Kenny, so let's add on to what you just said. Now the wife is mad at you because you can't come to your kid's birthday party. Okay, your parents are upset with you because you haven't called them. Your best friend's like, dude, I thought we were going to go golfing. Okay, but wait a minute. Add on to that the physical ailments that come. Okay, how many officers have good backs? How many of you guys have good knees? So there's a lot of time now you're not able to go play golf with that friend because he doesn't understand that you've been wearing this duty belt and this vest. So you have to compound all of that in addition to the stress on the job. And a lot of people don't realize that cops have a way, first responders have a way of holding all this in until it just gets to be too much for some. And then what do? Some of the ones that thankfully don't get as far as committing suicide, the vices come.
Yeah.
So some of them are over drinking, some of them are shopping, whatever the vice is, so, you compound that with bad admin, morality at the department. So it could be a real mess,
Yeah. I mean, I've been pretty lucky at my agency. At my first 6 years, I had 6 different chiefs. But I don't know if I was too new and I didn't notice or whatever, but I never felt like there was the pressure that I hear from other agencies about their administration. It was kind of like whatever happened in that turmoil up there with the 6 different chiefs. Like it didn't impact a lot of the guys and girls that were just going out there doing their job. They all kind of encouraged being proactive and just being the police. It wasn't like that turmoil didn't have a reflection on the morale within the agency. And as I've evolved as a cop, the weirdest things like seem to keep morale halfway decent. There's a lot of us that work out in the PD in the morning, and from the chief to the guy that has a day on the job. If you're in the gym, you get to talk shit and bust people's balls and do all that good stuff. And like none of it's going to be held against you. And so I don't know that for our, my agency, it kind of breaks down those barriers, and you can kind of tell when people are having good days, bad days, or bad weeks, and then you can kind of pull them aside and talk to them if it's their personality's changing. There's got to be something else going on. And I think if you have that personal relationship, and I know it's hard in big agencies, but if you start to have a personal relationship with the individuals that work with you or underneath you, or however you want to word it, when you see that change in who they are and their personality, that's the time to like have that one-on-one conversation to find out what's really going on. And if you already have that rapport, it's easier for them to open up with you. If you don't have a rapport and you try to talk to a guy about or a girl what her problem is they're not going to be willing to give you that information.
100%. And you've seen it probably more than you're willing to talk about, because it does happen a lot. Now, one of the things I said, and it's not that I'm playing favorites because Hobart is my home police department and I love you guys. But you're right. You don't see a lot of that turmoil in Hobart. And again, I'm going to credit it to, good mayors, for one, because the mayors that I've known have always allowed, the departments to do what they need to do, and help them with, they weren't cutting funding. They weren't saying, no, you're not going to do that. No, you're not going to train, because you know what? I've seen departments where they're not letting their guys train. They're not, doing the things they need to keep going, and if they're not even training, you really think they're going to get them, mental wellness treatments? It's so many things could snowball and make it so bad for officers.
Yeah, with my agency, this would be year 3, I think. They started a wellness program. So basically, you're required, and you can do it on your shift, like, but you have to go meet with one of the professionals, like the clinicians, and you can say nothing, or you can pour out your heart, but you have to go meet with them an hour a year. And sure, that's not like, if you're having issues, that's not the greatest, but then that opens that door, and I think that you can go, like it's just opening the door, and they're kind of making you, like, you don't have to say anything, but you have to do it on duty, and you get an hour to do it. So it just seems to, they're forward enough thinking to create, I don't know, create an avenue for you if you're having those issues.
No, you're right. It's that I like what you said. That door is open, and yeah, and it's sure it's one time a year. However, that door, like you said, is open. And what it does also say is that there's help available. You might not want to walk through that door, but if you do need to, we have it here, and it's always open for you. So that's another great indicator. What you're saying is what makes a good PD is that there's good admins that have put that in place for you guys.
You also do something with like some conferences for like female officers with Chicago PD?
I do. I sit on the board for the Chicago Association of Women in Law Enforcement, and I've been on the board maybe like 7 years now. And so, we do lots of great stuff, just trying to encourage more female officers, because it is such it's a male dominated, no secret. No, everybody knows that. But sometimes, women just want to, they joke, and I do appreciate seeing some of the, guys, treating like, hey, you're my little sister, I'm going to joke with you, and, excuse me, but there's times when maybe the female wants to talk to another female officer, and maybe there's only 1 or 2 in that department. So, we have an avenue where people kind of or female officers can come and get support and, do different things. Last year, 2024. Wait, was it last year? Okay, I think it was last year or the year before. I can't even remember. I'm sorry. But we hosted the International Women in Policing Conference. We had over 68 countries of law enforcement female officers from around the world that came to Chicago, and we got together for a week of, breakout sessions and, just the camaraderie, and we did different activities with them. And so it was a wonderful time. Next year, the conference is going to be held in Indonesia. So it does move around. It's the first time it's been in the United States, I think, since over 61 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can men come to these, or is it strictly?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Wait a minute. In fact, let me give a little plug. So on March 26th, we're having our 10-year gala at the Cultural Center in Chicago. And so that is open, of course, obviously. It's nice because our superintendent supports that. He's always, giving it. In fact, let me go back, because I do got to brag on him a little bit. When we did this conference, we knew it was going to be a huge undertaking. And we're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? So the superintendent allowed us to use like the transport buses from each district. They each gave us some to move people around. They had officers, come and be with us to offer like extra like security or on watch, for our guests that were coming through, to make sure that main avenue was good for them to walk at night. With the weather we had, it was really nice. And so he was really good to us. So with this conference, he's also very supportive of it. When they were having the riots and the DNC convention, Superintendent Snelling was so appalled. In fact, he went on TV and said this by hearing what some of the like rioters and protesters were saying to some of the female officers, that he went on television and he was like, I will not tolerate my female officers being talked to like that. You know, I have a sister, I have a mother, you know, so it's important to have people, again, in admin support our female officers. Especially coming from a male figure, that tells us a lot that, you know, we are supported.
What do you think some of the pitfalls are with women in law enforcement, or the lack of numbers when it comes to wanting to be the police?
Okay, first part of your question. So there's a lot of challenges for women in law enforcement, you know, and I'll be the first to say we do need female officers, because there's certain things, you know, especially the searches, you know, not everybody wants a male groping on them or whatever. So you got a female officer who's going to have to grope you or whatever, you know, I'm just using that word, but it's, so they are needed in some sense. They are also needed because women have a different compassion side than men. So maybe we're able to talk to maybe the suspect, you know, didn't have a mother. And as soon as he sees a female officer comes in, there's an attachment there, you know, so there's a lot of special reasons why we need more female law enforcement officers. And then the second part of your question is, did you say to get more officers altogether? Is that
Altogether? Yeah. Like why are applications down? Why are major agencies, state agencies, struggling to replace people that are retiring and leaving?
I think a lot of it is the culture of what's happening in the world right now. I think when COVID came, things changed, you know, a lot. I mean, we saw the rioting, you know, during a lot of time, you know, riotings that started because of different shootings and things beyond our control. It seemed to just take over the whole country. And so people are like, I don't want to be the police if I'm going to get sued or put to jail for doing my job. I don't want to be the police if I can't respond the way I need to. I don't want to be the police if my hands are tied. So I think we're seeing a lot of that. And, you know, just also we're seeing more where it seems like protesters or citizen journalists want to be out there and they want to only show the bad of what the coppers do. And they stepped in at the wrong time. They didn't see the part, you know, where the guy jumped them or tried to take the officer's gun. They only saw the part where the officer had to subdue the guy and, you know, take him down. So I think a lot of that is playing a big role in it.
Yeah, I think the reporting of legacy media has deterred a lot of people from wanting to do the job. And I don't, and maybe this is just because I was naive, but I always look back and I'm like, man, I don't remember this as a kid. Like I remember like Rodney King was like a huge one, but then like that's the only one. And then like after Ferguson, it's been like, I don't know, a 4-year cycle of like nonstop. And I'm like, when did cops become, I don't know, the bad guy as a whole? Like, you know, like people want cops to look at everyone objectively, right? Like not lump everyone together. But as a cop, we all wear the same uniform, and it could be different colors or whatever in different areas, different around the country. But someone in Los Angeles does something that looks bad, could be right. All of a sudden, all of us, every cop that wears a uniform is, you know, related to him and a piece of shit or whatever it may be. It's just, it's so interesting to me. I don't think there's another profession that's like this at all.
I don't think so either. I mean, you know, and it's always the running joke is, if you want to be loved, you should be a firefighter. You know, you want to be loved, be a firefighter, because you sure don't want to be a cop, or not in this atmosphere. You know, it's such a, you know, the job is so honorable. It really is an honorable job, but I think it's been painted so negatively, you know, by, you know, social media and bad reporting, and that I think has taken a heavy toll on officers, you know, not to mention, you know, the families of first responders, you know, because people have to remember, behind officers are their families. And so they take a good brunt of it too.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we've seen more people applying maybe in the past year or two. But yeah, for like when I was trying to be a cop, it was 100 people applying for one position, you know, and that was like, it took me 5 years to become a cop. And now it's like, man, I remember we were like hiring for like 4 people and 10 people made it to the final interview. I'm like, man, that is just crazy. And
Yeah.
bigger agencies were even worse and not even able to fill out an academy class. Like it is, I mean, I think that maybe I'm hoping that we have like a little bit of a turn in that. And I don't know. I always say that you know, we need to bring back glory to the profession. And and there's 2 things that I say about that. Like for me, like we do it to ourselves, but a lot of times you see like where this might come off wrong, but like dancing cops on TV give it a bad perception of what the job is. So now you have people applying that thinking like, this is what I could do. This is what I could do.
Yeah.
Dance. I'm like, that's not the job. So now I'm not mentally prepared to go out there. And when I do see bad things or I haven't prepared training wise, I'm going to act improperly or, you know, whatever it may be. Or there's lots of negativity in the community, even guys that have left and everything else. And I'm like, I don't like both of those suck. Cause if I was an 18-year-old kid and I'm like, I don't want to be a dancing cop. And if you're saying, you know, I look up to you for whatever reason, and you're saying this profession sucks and there's nothing good about it, like, why would I want to be a cop then? And we're losing great candidates because of that. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just hoping like we get back to like this is a very, it's a great profession, and it's, you know, we need to just bring glory back to it. I mean, it really is.
Back to basics, pretty much. I mean, it's you know, it's funny because when you said that, I'm thinking, you know, that makes sense because, you know, if, you know, say one of the detectives is dancing and all of a sudden they show up to, you know, a homicide scene and family's like, wait a minute, I saw you on a TikTok video. You know what I mean? And so it is kind of like a double-edged sword, you know.
Or how about this? You're the one that's calling because you don't have any case updates, and then you see him on TikTok dancing when he should. Like now what do you feel like? Oh, you have enough time to dance, but you can't like
You can't,
even give me an update on what my, you know, my missing daughter or, you know, like my whatever it may be. But like that's where I look at it as like it like I don't know.
That's a great point.
I mean, like we do it to ourselves because we do that kind of stuff. And like
great point.
I don't know. And I know that I think we at one point wanted to what was it like humanize the badge or whatever the saying was. And I just think we took that and we went like we missed the goalpost by like 500 yards because we were like, all right, let's like humanize the badge, and now we're like doing this shit. I'm like, what? Wait, we missed this. Like this is not what we were talking about by humanizing the badge. But I don't know.
Fire that PR person. Gone.
What are you doing now? Like up in I don't know if I can say where you're at, but what kind of a retreat are you on right now?
We're currently at a first responders retreat because it's so funny, Kenny, and it's weird because I'm not sworn in, but for some reason coppers treat me like I'm sworn in, and they allow me to do all these crazy things like be part of their FOP stuff and show up to first responder things, you know, and what you know what we do is very, you know, similar. We're showing up to the scenes with you guys. In fact, there's a word for it, and it's a co-responder. So not so much a first responder, but because we're with you guys on those calls, co-responder is the proper term, and I just learned that. And I learned it here. We're currently at a first responder retreat where we're talking about traumas and why officers aren't getting the help they need, and what can we do to you know, get them the help they need. And, you know, I really like the aspect of peer support because, you know, for me personally, you know, just sharing at a personal level, and everybody probably has a story, but, you know, I went to a therapist one time and, you know, she looked at me and okay, so what's the issue? So I started telling her, I can't get this image out of my head. I'm this. And she's looking at me and all of a sudden I'm like, you don't even know what I'm saying. You're probably like thinking about what's for lunch. You're nodding your head. You don't know what I'm talking about, you know? And so I stopped it. And I'm like, you know what? This isn't working. You know, I mean, I think we ended up talking the rest of the half hour about her life. And I was like, if it's not working for me, there's other officers that are probably sitting opposite, you know, like, you know, in the same spot as me, like, how am I going to tell her about the, you know, the dead baby that I had to carry, you know, into the ambulance, and I tried to save him, but I couldn't, you know, while she's just looking at you, nodding her head. Where I think if you said it to another first responder, they'd be like, oh my dude, I know what you're talking about. We've seen, there's more of that understanding. It's a very gruesome line of work too. And it's a whole different type of interaction that I think law enforcement, first responders have with each other in dealing with things. So they need somebody that can handle those things, not somebody who's going to gag when you mention, like we responded to a scene one time. They needed us to keep the family back because it was a big scene. It was a gang member that was killed and the family was getting out of control. So CPD was like, you can keep them over here. They keep wanting to come over that tape. So we're like, okay. So my partner Sylvia and I were there, and we're trying to talk to the family. Of course, they don't want to hear anything. They're just looking. Once the PD left to go do their thing, fire department comes out with the hose, spray down everything. And one of the mother of the victim breaks through the tape, and she starts drinking her son's blood. And I'm like, what the? Well, we seen it twice. That was like the first time. Then we seen it again. I'm like, what is that? So I come to find out it's a religion thing that some
I didn't know.
people. Yeah, it's a religion, and they believe that if they drink the blood, that their child never dies and they'll be alive somewhere else. So it's putting it back in, and he's being reborn again.
Wow.
So how do you tell a therapist? So anyway, so she was drinking his son's blood, and so for me, it's like I think of stuff like that. Like you can't relate unless you've been through something similar, or fireside chats that law enforcement has with each other. Yo, dude, guess what happened at this scene? It's a lot different than seeing, not that I'm knocking therapists at all. They're
Right.
very much needed, but I am also very pro peer support.
I'll touch on that in a second, but you talked about how you get invited to these things, and I think that we talked about like having Chicago, like someone vouching for you, or whatever maybe. But I think you've built that credibility where people have seen you in those traumatic things, and you've there to help them, and you've got almost like a trauma bond, kind of, like, and you're not a cop or
Yeah,
first responder,
right.
but you're there trauma bonding with them because of the situations that you put yourself in, to be honest with you. But and that they're with. So I think that that's why you have that credibility, and that's why you get invited to those types of things. But as far as like psychologists, clinicians, or peer support,
Right.
my buddy owns Pillars of Wellness. He's a clinician, and I grew up with him. And he's super pro law enforcement, super pro military. Worked in the juvenile center as a guard while he was getting his undergrad. So he kind of has some relationship there. But
Yeah.
super good dude. And for me, when it comes to peer support, like I don't think it's a bad thing, depending on the situation. Like, I had something that happened when I was young in my career, and I went to a sergeant at the time, and his response, I was like, "Hey, man, this really bothered me." He's like, basically, like, he's a POS. Don't worry about it. Like, who cares? And I was like, well, that didn't really work for me. So I had to go to my friend, and he can't theoretically see me, but I was like, hey man, like, can I just talk to you? And if you say like, hey, I think you need to see someone else, like, I respect our friendship, and that'd be good. So, but it took me to get it just out of my mind, because I just kept replaying it, and that's all it did. And like, so the peer support just has to be the right person in that peer support position, and not, yeah,
Absolutely. Right. And a lot of times we're seeing departments are like, oh, we have peer support here, but maybe it's about somebody there, or you don't want to walk into the building where people are whispering like, hey, what's he doing here? It's his day off. Oh, he's going in that room. He's going to go talk, so there's that worry too. Like people are going to start to wonder what's wrong, or maybe they can't do their job, or they can't handle it. No.
Yeah, we have so we have like that South Station at the mall. That's where we give the opportunity for you to go talk to the clinician and things. So like, it's very unassuming, if that makes, and people come in and out of there, and there's like a little private room, and no one knows you're in there or whatever. But I mean, so if you are having those issues, it's kind of discreet, and you don't have to go all the way to like an office where someone sees you walking in there. It's, like, I don't know. So they've tried to do, I don't know. I always talk my department up, but I feel like they've tried to do a lot of things the right way, where it's not frowned upon. It's actually encouraged. And if someone wants to pass judgment, it's kind of hard. I don't know, because you'd be like, oh, it's just my annual. I don't know. If there is someone with that negative mindset that's like, oh, going to see the clinician is like, yeah, I have to. It's my annual thing, and it's not a big deal. I don't know.
Yeah, but still, I do love that though, that they have that in place. And it says a lot. It says a lot that, we care about your mental well-being. We've been there. In fact, I know, mostly now there's a lot of young guys there that I don't know yet, but as far as the older ones, they've kind of come up the ranks, so
Yeah.
they know what it's like to be, it's not like you guys hired from the outside to bring somebody to the top. So everybody's been through the ranks and they've seen it all, done it all, so that also helps.
Yeah, for sure. I think I don't know. I have high hopes for the next generation of law enforcement. I really do. I think that when it comes to like the empathy aspect, I think that they have that figured out. I think that there was an era of it was really hard for them to communicate, like face to face,
Mhm.
or even. But for some reason, and this is my own personal opinion, I feel like the TikTok generation, even though they were
Mhm.
communicating, they were watching videos or understanding human behavior, and they like instead of watching like Instagram where you see a picture, now you see
Yeah.
interaction, even though you're not the one speaking. And I
Yeah.
don't it's crazy the way that works, but I mean, I don't know. The past 3 years of the people that we've hired are just great people. Like, and I'm not saying anything that it was just
Yeah.
society at the time, but like I don't know, their communication skills are great. Like, I don't know, they have empathy, they have understanding. They're not afraid to talk about their feelings. Like, it's just
Mhm.
completely different than when I came up. It was like, and not that that was something that was told to me. It was just kind of like an unspoken rule. Like, we are supposed to always be like the shield. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you'll deal with that at home, however you deal with it. But like here,
Yeah.
don't show any like, I don't know, any
Yeah.
kink in the armor or whatever it's called. Like, you always have to put on that facade that everything's great.
Exactly.
And that
You know,
nothing phases you.
I like that word, that empathy word, because I'm always talking about that with officers, especially, our detectives, because you have to be very mindful when you talk to families that are hurting. Now, you talking to somebody who just murdered somebody and you've got that guy in your hands, that's different. But you can't take that tone and then turn around and tell the family, you know, whatever you need to tell them, but using that same tone. You have to be so empathetic with these families. And, I think that's one of the other things I would like to work on, is um, not so much communication skills, but how to deliver the message, and I think it's, just, something that we need to talk about more, because I really see from the other side, from the family's perspective, is, you know, how they're talked to in a time of distress like that. And it may not be intentional, but I think it needs to be something that needs to be more minded.
Yeah, and I can't. I think cops don't show emotion in general most times, like happy or sad. It just kind of like that. It's just not there, and it's hard. I'm not defending him, but it's hard when you're dealing with this after this after this, and then now
Mhm.
you have to have enough self reflection to be like, I'm talking to a victim of a crime now, and not
Yeah.
a suspect or whatever it may be. And I think that that's a lot of times where we fail. It is what it is. I fail. Like I'm not talking shit about anyone. It's just it's challenging. That's a challenging aspect if you're dealing with bad guy after bad guy back, and all of a sudden you get a call for service where someone got their car stolen. You're going to talk to them the same way you just talked to the last 10 people without
Yeah,
realizing.
right. It's a lot of challenges and a lot to work through, and it's a lot of understanding, about it. But yeah.
From your perspective, from the outside, kind of,
Mm.
what has been some of the best evolutionary things that you've seen within the profession, like from the day you started working with Crime Stoppers and at the county to
Mm.
today?
I love to see now there's more community relations with other organizations. Like, I'm loving that. I'm loving seeing, organizations like here we have, excuse me, like Circle of Love, Sylvia's group who works with families affected by homicide. Now we're seeing departments that are saying, hey, Sylvia, we have a victim's family. They need some resources. Can you please step in and help on that note while we're working this case? Help them with what their victim compensation forms and this and that, and we'll work together. And so I love that they're utilizing more community grassroots organizations. And I also like seeing the new technology and the pro policing. I see a lot of pro policing, especially with some of these newer, I don't want to say newer chiefs, but chiefs that have been in maybe less than, you know 10, 5, 10 years, where you're seeing them take a different approach being proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah, I love seeing young chiefs in the progressive mindset, or
Yeah.
even an older chief that is willing to be open-minded
Yes.
about like evolution and change. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that a lot. Yeah.
So we're keep these to about an hour, and if you have nothing else, we always end the podcast with one question. But
Okay.
I will ask you that if you have nothing else.
Oh, nothing else.
Awesome. Wow. We
Okay.
teach for a company called Justice Academy. So what is your definition of justice?
Definition of justice for me is somebody or someone's, well, people or persons getting the outcome that is due to them based on a wrongdoing that's been done.
I appreciate it. Is there any place on social media or anything like that that people could find you at?
Yes, they can do a search for my name, Lisette Guillen. You can also Google and things will pop up. I found that out recently. You can just Google my name and stuff will pop up and kind of lead you into different stuff. But I have Facebook, Lisette Guillen. Also, you can find me on, what is it? Instagram. There you go. Instagram, which I don't fill often. I'm just so busy. I wish I did more of that. But you can find me, and I do check messages from time to time. And of course, my email, is always, on my stuff. So if you do need to reach me and I'm not responding, my email's on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me, Kenny. This is exciting. You have such a great show.
Appreciate it. Thank you.